guess that will take us on to A Quiet Place, which is Drew. I think
so yeah, this is Drew speaking about a horror film. Imagine how this is going to go. Aliens, big, bitey, blind aliens, with an incredibly keen sense of hearing, are eating all of the humans. Naughty aliens. Well, naughty, probably aliens. Who knows? But A Quiet Place rightly thinks we don't need to know. We are dropped into a world where humans are an endangered, hunted species. A barefoot family moves in silence through an abandoned store, looking for supplies and medicine, while trying to avoid making any noise that could attract the toothy and hungry monsters to their location. The daughter of the family has a particular disadvantage. She's deaf. After a tragedy strikes the family, we jump forward almost a year to find the family and a now pregnant Evelyn, Emily Blunt, having created a fairly comfortable, though fragile, life on a farm. But always there's the danger of the nasty beasties, coupled with adolescent angst. Oh, and the great problem of how you raise a baby. Not typically known for being quiet in a world with monsters who hunt by sound. There will be blood. Really? That's it for your setup. It's pretty high concept stuff. Humans are getting hunted and they have to be quiet. So, this is a horror film. Will it surprise you to know that I had problems with this film? But for once, it's not the excessively loud stabs, or more accurately stab, of noise. That actually made absolute sense. The sound massively amplified due to the shock it caused, the danger it created, and that it was relative to the subdued noise levels of the character's surroundings. There is a sound-related issue that I had a problem with, though, and that was that if the survivors truly did have to be quite so careful and silent, almost ludicrously so, then the idea that there was any point at which the creatures wouldn't be able to hear them when nearby is laughable. I did, however, successfully explain this away as them practising good oral hygiene. But there is one moment very early on that threatened to derail the entire thing. Yet somehow I made it through, which is not like me to be quite so forgiving. I have a particular dislike, though we all know by dislike I mean deep antipathy, for events and films that rely on a misunderstanding or lack of a single, obvious action. But the film's early drama is caused by a character who has already been shown to be competent and sensible, acting in a very stupid manner. Simply not giving the batteries along with the noisy toy to her brother would have evaded the entire problem. The screenwriters aren't new to the game, so it smacks of lazy writing rather than not knowing how to set up that tragedy. Although, also, I suppose you could call me an evil bastard, but I'm glad that the stupid little gut got munched. Idiot. However, in a manner most unlike me, I managed to forgive that sin, perhaps because the film's world had pulled me in almost immediately. I find both John Krasinski and Emily Blunt sympathetic and likeable, though I have my doubts whether John Krasinski's acting standards is particularly feature film worthy. And the constant dread I felt for Regan, the deaf girl who needed to be quiet to survive yet was at a huge disadvantage in doing so, kept the tension quite high for me throughout. Still not actually scary though, obviously. That would be madness. I just found it thoroughly effective, taut and efficient. My only other thought is that I wish they had gone all in on the quietness thing and used only diegetic sound. I would have found that thoroughly rewarding, but I guess the filmmakers were afraid the audience would dislike a total lack of score. So, shock of the night, and for some of our listeners in particular, I recommend this film.
I think I watched about half of this film going, this is a great gimmick. And it never really got past being a great gimmick for me. And by the end of it, my attention had sort of wandered, and I stopped caring about it quite so much. Rallies a bit by the end. I thought it was a reasonably strong ending. But yeah, John Krasinski and the familial relationship works pretty well. I think that's probably a nice warm emotional heart of it, and that seemed fairly believable in a film that otherwise stretches it. And yeah, it's almost good enough to sustain its gimmick, but in the end, not quite. I still didn't dislike it. I still recommend it. I still think people should watch it, but I was not as blown away as many other people have been. So yeah.
I wouldn't like to say that I was blown away, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hadn't expected that at all. I saw it in the cinema. Did you see it in your house, Scott?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if that made some difference or not. But yeah, it's especially for a genre that I find constantly unrewarding. This was a really pleasant surprise for me. Again, I had some issues with it, but the fact that I was even willing to forgive some of the plot holes was remarkable. So something immediately just like, okay, this is interesting. Go on, you've got my attention. So yeah, I'm not blown away with that. I know it's had a lot of very high praise, which seems... It's nothing special enough to warrant that sort of level of praise, but I still found it just, yeah, very competent and rewarding watch.
You know, I'm predisposed to appreciating everything that Emily Blunt says and does.
Of course.
And obviously I was like, all right, okay, 4-star reviews across the board for a horror movie. I actively hated everything about this film from about 2 minutes in, and I don't buy pretty much anything about it. It doesn't have the courage of its convictions at all. It sets itself up as a film that is going to have some sort of conviction to stick to its own internal plot logic. And like you say, Drew, the logical end point of that would have been diegetic sound. I think it would have enhanced the experience greatly. I think just deleting all known copies of the print would also enhance this film. I did not find the characters believable. At the point at which, under the premise of this movie, you lose a child, you're still 2 up at this point, and you decide to endanger your lives and those of your children and anyone else who may be around by creating a small screaming human. As I said, I lose all sympathy for you and your plight, and I think you deserve everything you've got coming to you. I was so annoyed by this movie. I thought, 10 minutes in, I thought, okay, they've had the courage to kill a child. That's not what I was expecting to start with. I mean, not particularly explicitly, but in a quite shocking way.
Yeah, it's satisfying too, little idiot.
Yes. They make the classic mistake that every film ever has made, despite everyone always saying, don't make this mistake, and everyone still does, of showing the creature. And when we see the creature, it's ridiculous and massively derivative.
It has toothy ears, that's not ridiculous.
Massively derivative of every other type of creature. The sound gimmick works when the film wants it to work and doesn't in other situations. On some occasions, the creatures will come running from 3 miles away at the sound of a mouse fart. At others, people clumsily drop things. Nothing happens. These creatures can slice through the side of a grain silo, but they're baffled by people hiding in a cellar protected by not a door, but a mattress. Whatever. If people enjoyed it, that's fine. I have no idea what's going on whatsoever with the appreciation for this movie, and it actively annoyed me. And you can probably tell that. I give it a massive avoid.
There are like issues there. Like you clearly mentioned the same thing that I did about the sound. It's like, yeah, if they're having to be that quiet, the fact that they could be in the same room as them and not hear them is ridiculous. For some reason, and it really isn't like me, I forgave that watching it because I don't know, something hooked me in. So this is just, it's so strange. I like this horror film, which almost never happens, and
it's great. It's a great premise because it's a really, really simple setup, and all of the best horror premises are. The more rules and stipulations you try to apply to a horror premise, the less well it's going to go for you, because inherently as a genre, it benefits from being kept simple. Because typically, horror films are built on ludicrous notions to begin with. So the number of those ludicrous notions you limit the film to, typically the better off it works. And it looked like this was going to be a film with at first I thought that's actually, to the best of my knowledge, a reasonably fresh premise. I don't know that another film has done that before, but roll with it. You know, lean into it. This is a multiplex film, and you've already taken a huge gamble by having a multiplex movie that's got almost no dialogue in it. So what have you got to lose by just going the extra 20%? Do you know, there's also other really annoying stuff in it. Little things this movie did annoy me. The whole thing of the scene near the start where they light the lights, and I think we see other sort of communities, apparently, I think that's what it was supposed to be, lighting signal lights and stuff as well. But don't ever expect to meet anybody or have that amount to anything whatsoever. I'm not sure why you would introduce the notion of these other pockets of human existence if we're not going to even remotely touch on them, save for one bizarre scene where they stumble across an old guy in a forest. I don't know. I also feel like, and I'm probably completely wrong about this, I also feel like I was promised that these creatures were actually a supernatural presence, and so I want to say that sort of the marketing material was, or was leaning that way, or that I'd explicitly read somewhere that this was a supernatural horror film. And I think that possibly would have worked better as a premise, because the alien thing is just so silly. The aliens, which, by the way, huge plot exposition pinboards that we always have to have in these movies, the type of pinboard with notes on it that nobody would ever write on a pinboard that just explicitly splaying out plot
What
points.
is the weakness?
What is their weakness? Question mark. Bulletproof? Exclamation mark. So
Why
the
are they
bulletproof,
so mean to us?
yes, exactly. What do you want me to get from the shops?
Were they not loved as baby aliens?
Exactly. All these ridiculous plot points spill out on the boards, and one of them being that these things apparently took on the army and won because they're bulletproof. But it's all right. Emily Blunt with a 12 gauge, no problem. One shot, kill.
I liked her attitude in that scene too. But I think also, to me, it was like, I bet she bought that shotgun at S-Mart. It had that sort of feel to it, that scene.
I wasn't impressed by any of it. It doesn't abide by its own internal logic, and it could quite easily have done so. All of the points that I felt it failed on, which are numerous, would have been easily avoidable. And I think you've gone to the trouble of setting up this really, actually, in fairness, elegant premise. It really is. It's quite a beautiful premise. One of those that makes you think, wow, actually, why has no one thought of this before? That's actually pretty good. For all that we've strip mined horror for its, for its various cliched setups, this gives you, at least, if nothing else, the legacy of this film. I think for me, in a positive sense, will be that it at least shows that maybe there are some original ideas still out there if we're willing to look hard enough for them, but it certainly didn't deliver on any of it. And I'm baffled by the box office and the press praise for this. I really genuinely am, and I'm not saying that to be contrary. I just feel it's one of those where I'm just like, have I watched the same movie as everybody else?
I was going to say two things. I don't know if I'm aided by having known nothing about this film going in, because my entire marketing for this film was, Scott said, I was going to see A Quiet Place. What's that? It's a film with John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. Oh, okay. And then it's like, it was on at the cinema and I watched it. But you're making me like it less the more you talk. Please stop talking.
You're right about John Krasinski as an actor. I'm sorry, and I'm not just saying that.
He's not feature film worthy, is he?
Yeah, I'm not just saying that because of Sour Grapes, because he stole my woman. I genuinely don't find him all that great of a presence. And what was that yell? What was that? Come on, John. You can shout better than that. Dad? Your first opportunity to scream in years, and this is what you produce? I suppose weakened vocal cords. That's what it'll be. Atrophy of the vocal cords. Okay, John. Take your meds. Go home. Sorry. Solo.